Okay, so I've changed my mind. Instead of doing an in-depth review on the Xiaomi Redmi Note 10, I'm going to do a comparison video with the Note 10 against its predecessor, the Redmi Note 9. I've had my SIM card in the Redmi Note 10 for today, and I've been testing out the camera and the performance, etc. So I'm just going to do a review now as to see which is better for you, the new Redmi Note 10, or will you be okay with the older Redmi Note 9? Okay, so the Redmi Note 10 was released back on the 16th of March this year, and it improves in a number of ways. So here are the specs by comparison, when which particular specs are better on which phone. So we'll start with the older Redmi Note 9. This was released in April last year and boasted some really good specs for the low asking price. So on the front you have a 6.5-inch LCD IPS display with Full HD resolution. That's 2340 by 1080, which is good for 395 pixels per inch. The display is protected by Gorilla Glass 5, and you have a punch hole camera in the top right hand corner which houses the 13 megapixel selfie shooter with an f2.3 aperture and 1080p at 30 frames per second video capture. On the bottom of the phone you have your bottom fire-in speaker, your USB-C port which supports 18-watt fast charging, a microphone and 3.5mm headphone jack. On the right you have your power button and your volume rocker, and on the left you have your SIM tray which supports 2 SIM cards and a micro SD card. Up top you have another microphone and an IR blaster. The Redmi Note 9 also comes with a large 5020 mAh battery, which does deliver really good battery life. If we flip the camera over, you can see the Redmi Note 9 has a centrally arranged quad camera setup, which consists of a 48 megapixel main lens at f1.8, an 8 megapixel ultra wide lens at f2.2, and a 2 megapixel macro lens and 2 megapixel depth sensor, both at f2.4. Photos are pixel binned to 12 megapixels by default, although there is a 48 megapixel mode there as well. Video tops out at 1080p at 30 frames per second, and underneath the camera you have your rear mounted fingerprint sensor. Powering the Redmi Note 9 is the MediaTek Helio G80 processor, which is a 12nm chip. This makes for some good performance day to day and also some light gaming as well. The phone runs Android 10 with MIUI skin on top. The model I have here is the 4 gigs of RAM with 128 gigs of internal storage, but there are other configurations to choose from to suit your need and your budget. Colour wise I have the Onyx Black version, but you can also grab the Redmi Note 9 in Forest Green, Polar White and Midnight Grey. The price I paid for this phone was £139 off Amazon, and I'll put the link in the description, so it's a really good price. So now on to the brand new Redmi Note 9. So again, if we start with the display, you have a slightly smaller 6.43 inch Full HD Super AMOLED display with a resolution of 2400 by 1080, good for 409 pixels per inch. So a better and more high resolution display. But this is where it gets interesting, as the display is protected with Corning Gorilla Glass 3 down from the Gorilla Glass 5 on the Redmi Note 9. Not sure why this decision was made, but there we go. The punch hole camera cutout is moved from the left corner to the centre, which I actually prefer, and this also houses a 13 megapixel camera with a slightly smaller f2.5 aperture. The selfie camera also tops out at 1080p video at 30 frames per second. The bottom of the phone is similar to the Redmi Note 9 with a bottom fire-in speaker, USB-C port which upgrades to 33-watt fast charging, microphone and 3mm headphone jack. On the right of the phone is the same as the Redmi Note 9 with a power button with integrated fingerprint sensor and volume rockers. The left again is identical with your SIM tray, which also houses 2 SIM cards and a micro SD card. At the top you have a microphone and IR blaster and also another speaker, because this phone has dual speakers, which is great to see at this price point. Power for this phone comes from a 5000 mAh battery, which again should give great battery life. If we flip the Redmi Note 10 over, again you're greeted with a quad camera, this time arranged in the top left hand corner of the phone. The camera specs are the same as the Redmi Note 9, but I would imagine with software enhancements to give better image processing quality. There is a difference in video capture on the main sensor, supporting up to 4K at 30 frames per second and 1080p at either 30 or 60 frames per second. For processing power, the Redmi Note 10 has the Qualcomm Snapdragon 678, which was announced in December last year, which promises upgraded performance, dynamic camera features and enhanced streaming capabilities. This is an 11nm processor, which should be slightly more power efficient than the G80 found in the Redmi Note 9. I have the 4GB RAM and 128GB of internal storage model, and again there are other configurations that you can choose. I have the Pebble White model, but it's also available in Onyx Grey and Lake Green. The price I paid for this phone was $199 off Amazon, and again I'll put the link in the description. So another quick look at the design of these two phones. For me, I prefer the Redmi Note 10 for a couple of reasons. Firstly, it's smaller in every way, but the main one for me is it's not as wide as the Redmi Note 9. I find it nicer to clutch in one hand. I also prefer the design. On the Redmi Note 9 you have a unibody plastic body that's more glossy, that as expected attracts more fingerprints, whereas the Redmi Note 10 has a white matte back finish and aluminium style but still plastic rails. The matte finish doesn't attract as many fingerprints, and the fact that the phone is white helps to hide the small amount that are there. The design of the camera for me is a tie. I actually really like the center arrangement on the Redmi Note 9 as much as the Note 10, so there's nothing to complain there on either handset. In terms of the fingerprint sensor, I prefer the side mounted one on the Redmi Note 10. I just find that my left index finger sits nicely and unlocks the phone straight away. Also, every other phone that I've reviewed has this fingerprint arrangement. However, both are very quick to unlock, so it's just a matter of taste where you prefer it to be. So yeah, both very responsive. I like that they've upgraded the fast charging from 18 watt to 33 watt. This should allow you to charge the phone from 0 to 50% in 25 minutes and 0 to 100% in about an hour and 15, so really good charging speeds. I'll briefly talk about the camera, as I'm no expert. So for me, I find that both phones take really good photos in good light. I'll post some photos from both at the end of the video, and also there's a couple of photos there that I've taken with a Samsung Galaxy S21, so you can compare that as well. On a bright day, you'll get bright, vivid photos with good detail. On portrait mode, both perform well at separating the subject from the background, thanks to the added depth sensor on board. Ultra-wide cameras work best in these conditions, although in lower light levels the detail drops and some photos can turn into a bit of a smudgy mess. The phones do have a night mode, but unfortunately this is only supported on the main lens, so I would stick to that in the dark. I did notice on the photo I took of my Diet Coke can against the sun, the Redmi Note 10 handles the harsh light better, retaining the blue sky better than the Redmi Note 9 does. Performance on both of these phones is really good. I only noticed the odd stutter here and there on the Redmi Note 9, generally when using the gesture navigation instead of the on-screen buttons. 0 so far on the Note 10. Unfortunately, neither come with a high refresh rate display, but you can't really complain at this price. And when it comes to the Geekbench scores, I can only report what I found on the Redmi Note 10, as on the Note 9 the app would go through the test but crash at the end and not give me any result. I tried uninstalling and reinstalling, but nothing worked. So the Redmi Note 10 scores 533 on the single core and 1608 on the multi-core, putting it considerably higher than the Snapdragon 665 in the Oppo A72, but just a shade less than the Snapdragon 730G found in the Motorola Moto G9 Plus. I've done separate videos for both of those, and I'll put links in the description so you can check them out. So that pretty much rounds up my comparison between the Redmi Note 9 and the Redmi Note 10. Now, while I do think that the Redmi Note 9 is still a really good phone, I think the extra £60 to £70 you'll be paying on the Redmi Note 10 is definitely worth it. You get a faster, more efficient chipset, an AMOLED screen over LCD, dual speakers, faster wired charging, and improved camera setup. So if it was me, go for the Redmi Note 10, no question. However, if you've got a Redmi Note 9 already, and if the improvements that I've stated here don't bother you, then you'll still be happy with the Note 9. The camera is still good, the Helio G80 inside is still capable of running day-to-day tasks, and the screen is plenty sharp enough for watching videos and looking at photos. And that's it. I've said all I need to say. I hope this comparison helps you in deciding which phone to buy. And as always, until next time, stay safe.